Another comparison on Ohio State, Michigan that has me wrestling for a final prediction, which I have yet to make,
Yeah.
is that I do still think that Ohio State's got a more talented roster. Now, if it's significant, I can't answer that question. It's apparently not. But I look at Ohio State and I see question marks. Michigan, I don't see question marks. I
Sure.
see solid units across the board everywhere. Ohio State's cleaning up all sorts of, now I'm not going to call them weaknesses because I don't think they're weaknesses from a talent perspective, but they have to be answered. Defensive backs, offensive line, quarterback. Do you see anything on the Michigan side? I hear second cornerback, maybe a bit of a question. Wide receiver core's not anything special, but that's about as far as it gets in terms of concerns.
So Michigan has recruited very well since you just mentioned the receiver position. Lately at receiver, they've gotten some very high, not as well as Ohio State, obviously, but some very high touted recruits, and Tyler Morris and Darius Clemens now who are going to approach their second season. And that wide receiver 3 position is the one that I expect to be up for grabs for the Wolverines this year. I think Cornelius Johnson and Roman Wilson have their spots stuck in that rotation. They will be there at 1 and 2. But I do want to mention that Clemens is a game breaker, and his speed and his strength and his height, he's a jump ball winner. He's a deep ball threat. And really, I know that Roman Wilson is very quick for Michigan, very fast guy, but you don't have that guy who can go up and get it. And Clemens might be able to be that at 6'3" for the Wolverines. But looking at other positions, I'm not super concerned about receiver, to be honest. A lot of vets there too as well. I want to look at corner. That's the biggest weakness I think on this team is the cornerback position. So they brought in Josh Wallace from Massachusetts, who is a vet. It's going to be his 5th year. He's a grad player. And he rated very well by PFF, and I expect him to start. I do. He's that savvy vet type of guy who can come in, plug and play right away. But I don't know what his ability is going to be as it relates to coming over from UMass in the Sun Belt all the way over to the Big Ten, which is a bit of a jump in competition. So we're going to see if his physical skill set can match up. And that's where you get, when you talk about physical skill sets, to guys like Amorion Walker from Michigan, who was a wide receiver, true freshman last year. He's 6'4". He can run like a bird, and which is flying. So, Walker is absolutely one of those guys who can emerge late in the season. Will Johnson sort of did that for the Wolverines. He got that sort of early season reps here and there in rotation, mostly garbage time. But then later in the year, he emerges as our top corner. And so a guy like Walker, if he can figure out getting his technique down, switching over to the position, and developing some good habits here in the fall camp, you could see him break out as a cornerback too on the outside for the Wolverines. I think Sainer still has that slot position locked down, though he can play outside if we need him. So that'll be interesting to see. And then moving on to edge rusher, Michigan very comfortable there, but not a lot of experience, especially in pass rush downs. So Jalen Harrell is the guy that played a lot of run downs last year for Michigan, sort of emerged, but his skill set isn't sort of expected to be as a great pass rusher. That's more a guy like Josiah Stewart, who came in from Coastal Carolina, had 12.5 sacks his freshman year there. Or maybe Braden McGregor, who's kind of on the verge of stardom according to Harbaugh and some other players in the program. But again, he hasn't been getting those reps. It's been a very deep defensive end edge rusher room for the Wolverines. So it'll be interesting to see who emerges here in camp. I talked about that on my 1 minute segment for the Maize and Blue review, Nelson's Nuggets, on our social media, where I went into the edge rusher position. And I do think McGregor could be that guy that sort of emerges as the key. Don't want to forget Derek Moore, who is an elite pass rusher, who will probably just be a specialist for most downs.
Nelson Hubble's here to break down the Wolverines here at the Voice of College Football. Please like the video, share the videos out on social media. Check out Nelson's work there at Maize and Blue Review, Michigan Rivals platform. Appreciate Nelson stopping by to give us a bit of an update and just talk some Michigan football before we get any real nuggets out of, that you can obviously use on your Nelson Nuggets, but nuggets out of fall camp, because that takes a while before, people, it's my experience that these teams are in camp for 2 days and people think that there's going to be some elaborate scouting reports out there.
Yes.
But, it takes some time for anything to leak out and for the media to see really anything there in camp. There's this Jim Harbaugh 4-game suspension looming. So nobody's concerned about the opponents. Although I would have to say, not threatening to win the game, but East Carolina is a pretty good football team and a good football program at that level. And then, of course, there's one Big Ten game against Rutgers. How is the football operation going to be handled? Has that been really revealed? Jim Harbaugh didn't talk about, so he didn't talk about, the issues that led to the 4-game suspension, but nobody could get even football questions or football answers out of him at Big Ten Media Days concerning how is the football operation going to be handled in your absence?
Yeah, so really Harbaugh and the program, nothing's really come out, but I'll tell you what I expect to have happen. I know that he can coach during the week and practice. That has been reported. That's now a known fact. So he'll be there for practices, game installation, all that sort of stuff. Now, when you get to game day, that's where you're going to show your concern. So Michigan has a few different guys that they can go to here, and it's Mike Hart, Sharon Moore, the two that I think will probably step up. Moore will miss the first game with a suspension. He was on one of the video calls with a recruit that ended up getting Harbaugh that 4-game suspension as part of that, and the hamburger gate and all that stuff. But I don't think the operation will be known at all until we get to game day of the first game. I really don't. Michigan, very tight-lipped. Harbaugh does not like to share very much, and Ward Manuel's pretty good inside that program. I think we'll hear things start to trickle out when we get to that week before, and maybe we'll have rumors, and, it's always hard to say what exactly that'll be, but I don't think we'll know until we get there.
Most of college football is focused on realignment. Now, obviously, being a Michigan guy, it's all about the 2023 season. I don't know if this is something that you're interested in or not. Of course, Michigan's safe, blue blood, always going to have a place, founding member of the Big Ten, all of that deal. But does this fascinate you, intrigue you, disgust you? Where do you stand on this?
I'm going to be honest. I am old fashioned. I think it kind of disgusts me. I love the old school conferences. I would go back to having, maybe what we had in the 1990s, right? I would say I would like to add Penn State to the Big Ten. So right when we added Penn State, to the Big Ten, that's where I cut it off. I don't like the change. I think the moving away from the regionality of it hurts the sport in some ways. Definitely when it comes to fandom. I think you're going to lose people going to games, and getting teams like UCLA and USC having to travel out all the way, potentially Washington and Oregon. Might hear some news drop about that pretty soon here. We're sort of waiting on confirming some of that rumors, but knowing that could happen and you're moving out to the West Coast, I mean, majority of this conference is in one region, and now you've got 4 schools, potentially at least 2 we know for sure that are going to have to travel all the way out here. And I do think it hurts a sport when you consolidate. I don't think there's as much competition. I don't think bowl season, whatever that's going to become, if they just keep expanding the playoff, who knows at this point. I think it hurts that. And I'm very old-fashioned, so when it comes to the conferences. So it does bother me a little bit. I've got family down in Tennessee, big Vols fans down there, which and I know that the SEC fans down, really they don't care because they know that they feel like they're very prominent and they've got their spot. And I know the Big Ten feels that way in the future. But that being said, it's not enough for me to just be able to flex, oh, we've got USC and UCLA in our conference, because that's not something I care about. And I know that some people who are SEC homers like being able to flex that they now have Texas and Oklahoma coming in and that they are the premier conference, according to them, which I don't think I can really argue with, to be honest, but I don't like it.
Yeah, I think if you root for one of those programs that's always going to have a seat at the table, then if you don't care about the health of the sport, you just want your team to succeed, your conference to be prominent, then you're fine. If your team's in the Big Ten or the SEC, you're fine. The sport may suffer, and I believe it will nationally, because like you, if there's little distinction between the NFL and college football, then why wouldn't people just watch the NFL? They're better players. It's a better product on the field. Hate to alarm college football fans. The NFL is a better product on the field. That shouldn't even be argued. Obviously, the players are better. But there's a regionality. There's a flavor. There's pageantry. There's history. There's tradition. There's all those things that make college football. I just think that, like you, the fabric of the sports being ripped apart when there was something special about an SEC team playing a Big Ten team in a bowl game or a playoff game, because they're different parts of the country. People talk different. They listen to different music. They eat different food. They're just, and that's that regionality's gone.
It is gone. And yeah, it's one of those things where you feel like when you talk about the NFL product, you're desensitizing fans to it too. You're being told that this is a great thing that everybody wants, and people behind the scenes are making decisions for you. And as fans, really we don't have any control, but it's the money that's powering all this. And when people who are making the decisions are only concerned about the financials and not concerned about the pageantry and the tradition and the history, things like this happen where like you mentioned, I feel like you're tearing away the fabric of the sport. One thing that I want to talk about is tearing down old stadiums. The NFL has no hesitation, with a few exceptions like Lambeau and Soldier Field. Now, Soldier Field is being threatened. That's partly where this opinion came from. But college football, they value the history of their venues, and they really like to update them and maintain them and keep that history. And so the idea that you would remove the history of these conferences, to me, feels like you're taking away a key part of this sport.
Absolutely, Nelson. I'm right there with you. I think it's fun in the moment to think about Clemson playing Michigan, and that would be an interesting matchup. It'll be fun. It'll be exciting. All those things. So there is a plus component to it that I think is going to wear down, though, over time, when Clemson plays Michigan for the fourth time and so forth. That, again, it's not going to counterbalance everything that's being torn down for sure. All right. Catch Nelson Hubble's work there at Maize and Blue Review, Michigan Rivals platform. Anything in particular, Nelson, that you're working on that people need to be looking out for?
Right now, I'm working on this Nelson Nuggets segment that I kind of mentioned a little bit. I do it every day. It's 1 minute on all of our social media platforms, the hottest topic in Michigan football. Follow along if you just want a little bit of information about the program. You don't have to be a fan, but it's quick. I move very quickly, get a lot of information to you, and then you get to take that in and sort of understand a little bit about the programs that, even if you're not a fan of, that you're going to be competing against.
Nelson, thank you so much for stopping by. It was a great time. Appreciate the insight.
Thank you for having me, Mark.